Hello, seventh graders. Today we're going to start chapter 7. We finished up the discussion of the American Revolution, and now we're going to get down to the real nitty-gritty of what has to be done after the war has been won, and that's basically creating a government, creating a constitution, and making sure that the new independent nation has the structure, the infrastructure, and the support that it's going to need to survive as an independent nation. So we're going to look at chapter 7, section 1, creating a republic. And chapter 7 is titled Creating a Republic. Chapter 7, section 1 is titled A Loose Confederation, which is going to refer to the 13 states in 1783 after the Treaty of Paris. The 13 states are not really yet identifying themselves as part of one nation. Each state is still really looking at itself. New York's looking at New York, Massachusetts is looking at Massachusetts, and so on. They're each looking at themselves as really one of 13 different states that are part of a loose confederation of other states. It won't be for a while until we really see that idea of national unity. But regardless, we're going to look at chapter 7, section 1, titled A Loose Confederation. Our vocab for chapter 7, section 1 consists of 9 terms, 4 of which are on top of the worksheet here. Let's look at the 4 that appear. The whole deck will appear on your Quizlet page and also will appear on your Google Classroom feed this week. First word, Constitution, a document that sets out the laws, principles, organization, and processes of a government. Second term is Bill of Rights, a list of freedoms that the government promises to protect. Third term is currency, which means money. And the last term is depression, which is a period in which business activity slows, prices and wages fall, and unemployment rises. Getting right to our reading here, let's start looking at the new country after the war has been won. The Declaration of Independence created a nation made up of 13 independent states. Now, most states wrote constitutions that stated the rights of citizens and set limits of power on the government, the limits on the power of the government, rather. States divided power between executive and legislative branches. So each of the 13 states at the time of the Declaration and at the period of time after the Revolutionary War ends, each of the 13 states pretty much divided power between an executive branch and a legislative branch. And some included a Bill of Rights. Some states included a Bill of Rights in their constitutions, which spelled out the rights of citizens. Continue on, while states formed their governments, the Continental Congress, which was meeting a couple of times in Philadelphia, they developed a plan for the nation, for the national government. And in 1777, it completed the Articles of Confederation. And the Articles of Confederation is the very first Constitution of the United States. Now, under the Articles of Confederation, the national government was weak. And we'll look at that in our graphic organizer. And this was done intentionally. They wanted a national government that was weak so as not to provide too much power to any one person or any one group. There was no president under the Articles of Confederation to carry out laws passed by Congress. And there was no court system to settle disputes between the states. The weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation was a problem as the nation faced an economic crisis. The national currency was valueless after the war, and states refused to share taxes with the national government. States were under no obligation under the Articles of Confederation to pay taxes to the national government, and if the national government can't collect taxes, it will not be able to pay its what? It will not be able to pay its bills. Okay? As a result, the country fell into a depression as it struggled to pay its bills. Now, this depression hurt farmers, and many of them lost their land. Some Massachusetts farmers resisted the seizure of their property in an uprising called Shays' Rebellion. We will see a short video clip in class on Shays' Rebellion. Many Americans saw the rebellion in Massachusetts, Shays' Rebellion, as a sign that the Articles of Confederation did not work and needed to be revised. And we'll be talking about this revising or tweaking the Articles of Confederation to better serve the new nation, to better serve the fledgling nation of the United States. In 1787, Congress passed the Northwest Ordinance. Northwest Ordinance is important because it set up a government for the Northwest Territory, the lands lying north of the Ohio River and east of the Mississippi River. It outlawed slavery in the territory and said that the area could be divided into smaller territories. Once a territory had a population of 60,000, it could apply for statehood. And each new state received the same privileges as the original 13 states. We will talk more about this Northwest Ordinance and the mechanism by which new states were added to the Union. But the important thing right now to know is that once a territory had a population of 60,000 people, okay, it could apply for statehood. All right, it could apply for statehood at that point. Now, the chart on this section is titled the Articles of Confederation. And again, the Articles of Confederation, as we just learned, was our nation's first constitution that was drafted by the Continental Congress in 1777. And the weaknesses under the Articles of Confederation, one of the facts, rather, regarding the Articles was the weakness of the national government. They intentionally made sure that the state governments had more power than the national government because the writers of the Articles at the Constitutional Convention wanted to make sure that the national government didn't have too much power and that one individual or a small group of individuals didn't accumulate too much power. So there was a weak national government under the Articles. Also under the Articles, each state had one vote in the Congress. And in order for a law to be approved nationally, 9 of 13 states had to approve of the law. So 9 of 13 had to approve in order for it to become a law under the Articles. Also under the Articles of Confederation, Congress cannot control trade between states or with foreign countries. There was no congressional control that would be able to be maintained over trading between the states or with foreign countries. Also, Congress had to ask states for money under the Articles. We talked briefly in the reading that states could not be compelled. They could not be forced to pay taxes to the national government. Congress had to ask states for money under the Articles. And also, under the Articles, there is no judicial branch of government and no real executive branch of government under the Articles as well. There was no federal court system, and there was no national leader under the executive branch of government. States had executives, states had governors at this point, but there was no national leader heading the executive branch. And more importantly, the second part here, there was no judicial branch under the Articles. There was no mechanism under the federal government, under the Articles of Confederation, that would allow disputes to be settled in a court of law. And eventually that will be changed when the Articles of Confederation is thrown out and replaced by our current Constitution. So looking at our questions on this class's reading, Chapter 7, Section 1, the question on the reading, question number 1, is how did the Northwest Ordinance provide for growth of the United States? How did the Northwest Ordinance provide for the growth of the U.S.? How do we become a nation of 50 states when we started out as a nation of 13 states? And you can find the answer to that question in the reading here that talks about the Northwest Ordinance. So take a moment to answer question 1. How do or how did the Northwest Ordinance provide for the growth of the United States? And question number 2 on our chart/graphic organizer, under the Articles of Confederation, how many states must approve of a law? Under the Articles, how many states must approve a law in order for it to go into effect? That wraps up this screencast on Chapter 7, Section 1. When we return, our next class period, we will look at 7-2, and we will look at the Constitutional Convention, which takes place in that city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.